Good morning to all of you out there in radio and web, in the web world. I'm going to be doing a class today, or probably more than one class. You know, I grew up in the 60s. I would have had to go to Vietnam if I had not had hearing loss. And so many of my friends in school went to Vietnam, and they died there. Many of them were injured there. Just numerous, 20 to 35% of my class. Some girls also went to Vietnam in different corps there. And so when I was in high school, when John Kennedy was murdered, and I remember where I was. The person that came and told me that her name was Patricia Collins, and she was crying and came up and they said they had killed our president. President Kennedy was assassinated. So ever since I was very young, I have been very interested in this. One of my neighbors, his brother was in naval intelligence, and I heard things from him that were not coming out. It was not the same thing that was going on NBC, ABC, CNN, and all that. And the Warren Commission. Pretty much the Warren Commission was made up of all the enemies of JFK. Did you catch that? The Warren Commission was made up of nearly all the enemies of JFK. From what I've studied, Madeline Duncan Brown was LBJ's girlfriend and lover for 21 years, I believe. She had a son by him, and the son looked just like him. He was later basically killed. He had cancer, but they kept him from his treatments and he died. He was arrested. I'm jumping all around here. But a big old man by the name of Hunt in Texas. Madeline Duncan Brown was a very Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald, David Ferry, all these people all ran together. And Hunt, LBJ, and they would get together, they would talk about what's going on. They all hated Kennedy. They hated Kennedy. And why did the military complex and the CIA and the FBI hate Kennedy? Well, because he was going to change all of it. He was going to get out of Vietnam. He was going to keep the silver standard. He was going to dismantle the CIA because they had become corrupt. He fired Allen Dulles. He fired one of his big generals that was over the Bay of Pigs. They were going to go down into Cuba. The CIA and the FBI and the Mafia. The Mafia, when Fidel Castro took over, they ran the Mafia out of all of the casinos in Cuba. They wanted it back. They'd lost millions and millions of dollars. Well, they had a convention in California. Hunt went out to the convention in California. And they wanted to run LBJ for president, but they didn't think he could win. So they set up Kennedy to allow him to run. Basically, is what J. Edgar Hoover, they had a lot of things on Kennedy for sexual misconduct. And J. Edgar Hoover had a lot of information on him. Well, he told him, he said, if you run, you're going to have to pick LBJ as your vice president. Well, he didn't like LBJ. LBJ didn't like him. But they act like they liked each other in public and all of that. Well, Hunt, when he came back from California, and they had basically, Kennedy had got the nomination, and the LBJ was going to be his running mate. That's what was going to happen. He came back and he told Madeline Brown, he said, well, we lost the war, we lost the battle, but we're going to win the war. From that very time, they were setting up JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and they were setting up Lee Harvey Oswald at the same time. plans, a lot of plans. This is from my lifetime of study that I'm taking to you right now. Lee Harvey Oswald, and he had two brothers that were all military, and they were all in intelligence. And Lee Harvey Oswald went to California, and he was a very quiet person, a very studious person, very brilliant man, very highly intelligent. And he wasn't much of a shooter or a soldier. He was intelligence. Well, he could barely qualify with a rifle at all. Not much. Very poor shot. And he would study and reading all the time. And they gave him some tests on Russian. Why would they give anybody a test on Russian if they weren't going to use him for something in intelligence? He got out of the Marines a little bit early because of his mother was ill. They said he needed to go and take care of her. And he stayed with her about 1 month, and then he went to Europe. Zip to Europe. Went to Europe, and then he ended up in Russia. By the way, he was more fluent in Russian than he was in English. He went to Russia. He denounced his American citizenship. He was CIA then. He was CIA intelligence. Now, when he got married in Russia, and he had a little girl, and they let him come back. Now, normally, if somebody was a traitor, they would try him for treason when they come back. But they opened the door and paid for his wages, paid him wages, and fared to come back home with his wife, which was not an American citizen. He came back and opened. The doors were open. The doors were open. The doors were open. Wherever he went, the doors were open. Wherever he went, he had handlers. They wanted him to look like a communist, but he was very anti-communist. He went to Louisiana. He went to different places. He started working with David Ferry, Clay Shaw, or Bertrand, whichever one you want to call it. They were all CIA. David Ferry was a crack shot pilot, and he was he trained the people that were going to go into Cuba, in the Bay of Pigs invasion. That was all CIA. President Kennedy fired every one of them, had Allen Dulles and all the generals and everything that had anything to do with it. He said, you will not invade another country. He was meeting secretly and writing letters to Khrushchev and with Fidel Castro, because he did not trust the CIA and the FBI at all, and he shouldn't have. LBJ in the background was a killer. He was an extremely corrupt politician. His father had been an alcoholic politician, and he had a hitman by the name of Mac Wallace. And some of you out here know, and you may have heard some of these names before. Mac Wallace killed between 17 and 19 people for LBJ. He killed LBJ's sister and her boyfriend. He killed her boyfriend first, and then he killed Josefa later. Everything's covered up. Everything's covered up. They're all covered up. J. Edgar Hoover and Lyndon Baines Johnson were really good friends. The night before Kennedy was assassinated, J. Edgar Hoover and his lover were in a branch, a big meeting they had. Hunt was there, quite a few people. Madeline Brown was there. When they came out of this meeting, LBJ showed up late. He came in there and he was in a bad mood, and he was pretty nuts. He was basically a sociopath, crazy man. But he was going to do exactly what they wanted him to do. He was going to get rich, and they were going to get rich, and they were going to do what they wanted to do with the military complex, the FBI, CIA. J. Edgar Hoover was going to be forced to resign the two Kennedy boys. Now, when Kennedy got elected, especially out of Illinois, the mafia had a lot to do with pulling strings back there with Joe Kennedy. and they manipulated the ballots and the votes back there in Illinois to where he won the election. The mafia did that. Well, when he got in there, Joe Kennedy told the heads of the mafia that they were going to get Cuba back for him. But instead of that, John Kennedy appointed his brother, Robert Kennedy, as the head of the Attorney General. And they went after the mafia, they went after Jimmy Hoffa and all of that. The exact opposite of what they expected out of him. Well, things were going. We almost had a nuclear incident there with, I remember all of my family were going out and buying sugar and flour and all kinds of stuff when that bad pigs and the missile crisis came along. A lot of things were done underhandedly. Kennedy's family wanted things covered up actually later on, Robert Kennedy, and of course Robert Kennedy was killed. They didn't want him in there because he would have stopped the military, he would have stopped the wars. As we go on now, you're getting bits and pieces of it here and there and all over the place. Wherever Lee Harvey Oswald went, he had a handler or a babysitter. And the handler or the babysitter would make sure that he had clothes on his back and food to eat and a house and a car and whatever he needed. By the way, there were 2 or 3 Lee Harvey Oswalds. When Lee Harvey Oswald was in Russia, Lee Harvey Oswald with the CIA, with David Ferry and Clay Shaw, they had a Lee Harvey Oswald go down there to buy 10 Ford trucks. And they wanted the discount for the CIA invasion as they were training the troops down in Louisiana. There was Lee Harvey Oswald drove a car in Texas, and he was a pretty wild driver, but that wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald as we know him, the one that was killed by Jack Ruby. Now Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald, David Ferry, and Clay Shaw were all friends together. They were all seeing each other often, running back and forth from Dallas and going into Louisiana, Baton Rouge, whatever. Now, they were going to kill Kennedy several times. They were going to kill him in Illinois, in Chicago, but they said that's too close to home. LBJ didn't really trust the mafia because he said that they could hold it blackmail over his head if they did they worked with him. But he was going to have Mac Wallace do it. But the FBI was working with the mob, J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover, the night before, with LBJ and all of them there in that ranch in Texas. When LBJ came out, Madeline Brown was glad to see him because here's her lover. And she figured that he would say something, meet me someplace or whatever, because they did. They had places they met. And he whispered to her, she thought he was going to tell her something sweet, and she said, after tomorrow, those so-and-so Kennedys will never embarrass me again. Tomorrow, the end of it. He said, that's not a threat, that's a promise. The killing was going to take place. Lee Harvey Oswald had handlers in Dallas. When he went there, there was the White Russians there. There was a lot of Russians that had to leave Russia because they were part of the royal family. And there were some of them there. And they all befriended his wife and him, and there was one very wealthy one that was an oil man also. And he bought him new fancy suits and all kinds of things, and whatever he needed a job. By the way, he did a lot of background going and putting applications in for jobs. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald thought he was going with the CIA, but they were setting him up all the time. I could give you the names of all these people, but boy, there's a lot of them involved. All the way from New Orleans, all the way to Texas, and every place in between, including California. Now the news is part of this too. NBC, CBS, ABC, all of this, CNN, this is all part of the Washington political machine. And they have been, we know, for the last 16 years or so. Absolutely. Fighting Trump in every way they can. 97% negative. We find out that Jim Garrison had problem with his CNN and NBC and all of that. They were paying people to say he lied. His own witnesses. And one of his own men they bought out. Well, things keep on clicking. Clay Shaw, David Ferry, Jack Ruby running back and forth. All of these people, Lee Harvey Oswald, meeting secretly. All of them calling for the death of John Kennedy. David Ferry was just absolutely rabid with it. He was saying how they're going to do it, how they were going to triangulate the shooters and all this kind of stuff. He said, we can get him, we got to kill him, we got to kill him, we got to get rid of him. We got to fight communism. And that's where they were patriots. But they were also CIA and FBI. They were all working together. They had secret phone numbers. They'd call and leave messages to each other, money going back and forth all over the place. So they finally, the mafia, look at my notes here sometimes to get some of these names. Sam Giancana was one of the heads of the mafia. He worked with Johnny Rossellini and Charles Nicoletti, and with James Files. James Files' real name was James Sutton. He was a CIA man, went into Vietnam, did a bunch of things over there, killed a lot of people. Came back here and he was a race car driver, and Charles Nicoletti saw him driving, and he asked him if he'd like to be his driver. Charles Nicoletti and Don Rossellini were hitmen. And so he got involved with them, and then he began to do the hits too, killing people. We have learned a whole lot from James Files. He made two statements about this. The men in the CIA that investigated, and that's going on right now in Washington, D.C., these files are coming out. Everything that James Files said was absolutely dead right. John Rossellini was sent by the CIA to call the hit off in Dallas. He was going to be the main shooter. He wouldn't shoot. Charles Nicoletti was there, and James Files was there. Mac Wallace was there. Maybe a man by the name of White. That's kind of maybe. And he was part of the Dallas. But see, LBJ owned Texas. He owned Texas. He owned all the politicians in Texas. They scratched each other's back. Now, I'm getting a little bit ahead here, but I want to tell you something. According to what's been released with Luna in the hearings in Washington, D.C. right now, John Kennedy was shot in the back from behind. He was shot in the head from behind. He was shot twice in the head from front and once in the throat from the front. Now, there's at least 3 or 4 shooters there. James Files said he was the one behind the fence on the grassy knoll. Charles Nicoletti was someplace in that area, shooting from the front. James Files used a 219B, with a little Remington pistol, that's a bolt action. Basically, it's a .222 Winchester. He had the shells were made, the projectiles, the shells were specially loaded with mercury. They were mercury rounds which would explode when they hit. Now, all of you hunters out there, all of you hunters, I've probably killed nearly 400 deer in my life, and a lot of animals, bear, lion, whatever, hogs. And when you shoot an animal, there's a little bitty hole where it goes in, but it explodes. Big, massive hole on the other side. I always used to shoot deer through the heart. They would die instantly. It was just real fast. I'd hit behind the ribs here, behind their shoulder here. It would go through and just very much blow the heart out the other side of their body. That mercury round exploded in LBJ's head. The doctors that are still alive are testifying as to what happened. They say the magic bullet is nothing but a fairy tale. The Warren Commission was nothing but a fairy tale, just like Jim Garrison said years before. He was shot 2 times in the head, one high, one behind the ear, one in the throat here. The throat shot would have killed him, they said. He was shot in the throat. That's why he grabbed his throat when he was shot. And then he had another shot in the head behind. He would have been shot in the upper part of his back. Behind the shot in the back, they said would not have killed him. But the one in the throat would have killed him. And then, of course, all the head shots would have killed him. They were Nicoletti, Johnny Rossellini, and James Files were all supposed to do head shots only. James Files, with a little pistol rifle that he had behind the fence, he wasn't supposed to shoot unless everybody else missed. There were 5 wounds, 5 different wounds on JFK's body. One in the back, one in the throat, 2 in the head, in the front, 1 in the head from behind. That mercury round blew out the whole back of his head. That's where his head exploded. James Files ejected out of his little fireball. That's what it was, a little Remington fireball. They called it the Fireball 219 Fireball. But it shot a .222 shell. They took it out, bit it with his teeth, and put it on the fence, and then left, walked off. He met 2 other men there. They went, they changed the cars. He went back. He went to a motel where he was staying. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald, when James Files came to Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald was involved with the assassination. He was anti-communist, he was anti-Castro, anti-Khrushchev, all of this, and the CIA, these were all people that all had the same idea. He took and showed James Files all around Dallas for several days. Took him out to a shooting range where he finally sighted in his .219B, that little fireball, Remington fireball, and he picked up all of the rounds around there. Picked up all the rounds where he had shot. He used more than one weapon. He had carried several weapons with him. Then he went back and he talked to his handler, James Files did, and he said, "How well can you trust Lee Harvey Oswald?" He said, he knows all about what we're going to do. Is he trustworthy? They said, "We'll take care of it. We're going to take care of it already." Well, this is going on now. This is a long story and a lot of people involved. J. Edgar Hoover was directly involved. George Bush Sr. was directly involved. The Bay of Pigs, Operation Mongoose, all of this. This is all J. Edgar Hoover. This is all Allen Dulles. This is all the Bush family. They're all involved with this. By the way, President Nixon, later on, Richard Nixon came by that ranch that night. He didn't know what was going on. But he came by there and he saw all these people there and didn't stay very long and he left. The real meeting behind closed doors took place later when LBJ showed up. All of his plans had been done. It was going on for weeks, months, years. It wasn't just then, it was planned for years. They were always going to kill him. Lee Harvey Oswald was always going to be a patsy. He did not know it. He was being a patriot, doing exactly what they told him to do wherever he went. And so, the assassination comes. Charles Nicoletti takes his place, Mac Wallace takes his place, maybe the guy named White. There were two different people in the book depository, and maybe from one other building also. By the way, the prisoners over there, which were only yards away from the windows, they were seeing these guys with the rifles. Sniper rifles, not that, by the way, there were 3 rifles. 3 rifles, one without a scope. The Italian rifle, which couldn't shoot a fish in a barrel, basically. And then there was a German Mauser. Supposedly the German Mauser was the first gun they held up. And then they had 3 different rifles. They ended up only having 1 rifle, by the way. They shot John Kennedy. They scattered. Mac Wallace went his way. Charles Nicoletti went with James Files and then another man from the Mafia CIA. James Files was CIA and Mafia. In the meanwhile, the Mafia sent a man to kill Lee Harvey Oswald. They're going to shoot him. Tippit got in the way. Officer Tippit got in the way. And he killed him. James Files went back to his motel room. He took wax and waxed his face, waxed his hands and arms, all of this, and took a shower, and then somebody knocks at his door. You can listen to him, by the way. I shot JFK, and this is factual, very factual. Then the guy that shot Tippit shows up. He said, I had to burn a cop. He said, get rid of my weapon for me. He said, no, you get rid of your own weapon. How do you know even though I'm here? David Atlee Phillips was supposed to meet, and he was the handler of all these people. David Atlee Phillips, Secret Operations, was handling Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald thought he was supposed to meet him in the theater. That's why he went to the theater. He went to the theater, and this hitman went to Oswald's residence to kill him. And so Tippit gets in the way, so he kills him. And so James Files tells this guy, and he won't tell his name, he said, get rid of your own, that's your own problem, get rid of your own gun. And David Atlee Phillips had given that Remington fireball to James Files to kill. It had already been used to kill 2 or 3 other people. And he had a special man that loaded the mercury rounds. They said later on do an autopsy again on LBJ or JFK, that is, and because there's going to be mercury in his head someplace. Even though his brain was taken out and everything, there's going to be mercury in that head somewhere. You can't get it. Mercury doesn't go away. So he goes on and goes back. They gave him $35,000 for doing the shoot. Other people got paid also. Now remember, Lee Harvey Oswald's 2 brothers were in the military also. They were all military family. Now, I've got more of this story later. I hope that this has intrigued you. I hope it's answered some of your questions. You go on YouTube and you can listen to James Files. He'll give you an absolutely detailed account of what happened and the people involved. He never would squeal on another hitman or anything at all. He would not give them, they were all dead by the time that came up. We know now who killed Jimmy Hoffa. He had a deathbed confession also. And of course there's a lot of people out there doing all kinds of stuff. But these people are documented, real documented. Remember, John Kennedy was hit 5 times. The 3 imaginary bullets from that rifle that you couldn't shoot hit the broadside of a barn with. And by the way, Lee Harvey Oswald, they did a test on his face where the rifle would shoot like James Files took the wax. He hadn't had time to go home or anything at all. He was supposed to shot Tippit with a pistol, which would have had powder marks all over, powder in his hands, and when you had to do a paraffin test, a wax paraffin test, they would have found it. They would have found it on his face, but there was no powder marks on his face, and the only small was in his hand where he had picked up the rounds that James Files had shot. That's all. Think about that evidence. John Kennedy was shot in the back. John Kennedy was shot in the throat. The back shot, the throat shot were pretty close together. The head shots were almost exactly the same sound. You couldn't tell the gunfire from one from the other. They were almost simultaneously. And that was Charles Nicoletti and James Files. James Files did the deadly one. That was the exploding bullet out of the Remington Fireball, the 219 Fireball. They found the shell that he had bit and put on the fence later, years later, and it had the indentions of a man's dental teeth in it, just exactly like James Files said, and that's happened years later. When he gave that interview, he didn't know if it had ever been found, but everything that they've done in the files with Luna have come up exactly like James Files said happened, and just exactly like Jim Garrison did. The movie LBJ, they said, is a whole lot more accurate than the Warren Report. The Warren Report is a fantasy, a fairy tale, just like Jim Garrison said so many years ago. We've had some real rough times in America. We've had some real bad presidents. We've had some real bad senators and real bad representatives. We've had some real bad CIA and real bad FBI. Today, I think we're cleaning house if they don't kill them again. CBS, NBC, CNN, all of those have always been on the side of corruption. I hope you don't listen to them. Because if you do, you're not getting anything but a mess. Just propaganda. The fake news, as they call it today. It is. It was the fake news back then. They were still defending themselves. They're still defending themselves today for covering up for Biden and Obama. The background, all of that. I think that in this period of time, and I don't know how much we got left in this church age that we're in, but I think God has allowed the people to get into Washington, D.C. to clean house as they have. We've got the best people there that we've ever had in the history of America. I mean it. I study history. I taught political science, Western civilization, all of this. I think we got the best group there that's ever been in Washington, D.C. Of course, we still got some rats in there too. You know, we got a lot of rats. There's rats and cockroaches wherever you go. Pray for our country. Pray that the truth will come out, which it has been coming out. The doctor, I listened to this several times with the different people, the CIA investigators, all of this, and every one of them comes up. The Warren Commission is a fairy tale. JFK was hit 5 times. His brain was stolen. The files were manipulated. The x-rays were changed and manipulated. All of this was corruption, 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 corruption from A to Z. And we know the people that were involved in it. Why did they kill JFK? He was going to keep the silver standard for one thing. He was going to get out of Vietnam. He was going to make peace, not war. And they didn't want that. That's not what they wanted. And today, what do we have? What did Trump inherit? The first time he won the election, he had a bunch of snakes, wolves among him. He was like a sheep going into a flock of wolves, a pack of wolves. He didn't know who to trust or not. He wasn't a politician. You know, McConnell said back there, and that's what you get for electing a citizen. We need more citizens there, more honest citizens. We have that problem in every nation and in the world, every state in America. We've had it here, in the remote places you can think of, but corruption, corruption, corruption. Bad cops, bad attorney generals, bad people involved. We have it all over. It's in your locality, wherever you are. Our Father, I send this message out for your honor and glory to people like Lee Harvey Oswald that were just turned into a villain, that was just following orders. Yeah, they were going to kill Kennedy, they did, because he wasn't their man. But they made such villains out of some people that were heroes, like Jim Garrison, a hero. Man in the military for 23 years, district attorney, honest man. Just wanted the truth to come out. Father, I thank you for these people in history that have stood for the truth. I thank you for all the blessings and the people I've known in my life, and the many things that are coming out now. The transparency in our government today is more transparent than it's been since 1776.